Logan Paul versus Dillon Danis and Jake Paul versus Andrew Tate could be on the horizon. This is big news. It's not MMA news really, but it does involve some names from MMA like Dillon Danis. I guess you could say he is a name from MMA. He barely competes in anything anymore, so he's not really a name of anything other than Instagram comment sections. Either way, I am capitalizing on this news by making a video and breaking it down because I need viewership, and this is some very big news in the combat sports-ish world that I'm going to be breaking down. I'll start with Logan Paul versus Dillon Danis, which is an interesting turn of events, in all honesty, and it's being targeted and rumoured for December, and honestly, Danis wins. That's all I'm going to say from this. Dillon Danis has won. He'll probably lose to Logan Paul. Logan Paul's a bigger man. He's actually okay at boxing here and there. He's been training it for quite some time. Even if he doesn't even have a fight coming up, I know he competes and trains to keep in shape by doing that type of stuff, because now he has a job where he kind of has to stay in shape, which he's just signed with the WWE. So he needs to stay in shape anyway, and boxing is one of the ways that he does that. And now he's fighting Dillon Danis, and honestly, if Logan Paul did not take this matchup, Dillon Danis would have nothing. Maybe Dillon Danis could talk his way into a Woodley matchup in a boxing ring, or maybe he could talk his way into a Dan Hardy, Diego Sanchez winner matchup or something like that, if they would even entertain that fight and stuff like that. So for Dillon Danis, this is the best it's ever going to get, and I have no doubt in my mind he's going to take that matchup against Logan Paul, because I reckon he'll guaranteed earn $500,000 for it, even if he doesn't really get any pay-per-view points. The press conference is going to be filled with trash talking, so that's going to be good for Logan Paul. And I feel as though Logan Paul wants an excuse to stay in shape, to get ready for his WWE career coming up ahead of him. And Dillon Danis is like an excuse to get in good shape, because he'll be training for a fight. He's likely going to beat Dillon Danis. His popularity will boom around that time, and then he'll likely start his WWE career after that as well. So he'll get a nice big boom of popularity, beating Dillon Danis, and then he'll transfer over to his WWE career. But this is big news. And for Dillon Danis, he's finally got a win, in all honesty. Because if Danis wins, you're just going to have to deal with him, really. And it's a sad reality. But if Dillon Danis wins, we're talking anything. He'll get a rematch with Logan Paul, maybe. He'll get a Jake Paul matchup. Like, he's going to guarantee himself another massive payday. It feels so weird talking about this, but this is the world that we're in right now, where this kind of absolute circus is a mainstay of the planet that we're on. But that's how it is, man. Logan Paul calls out Dillon Danis. I didn't even think he'd want to, but there is a part of me that thinks this is why he's called out Dillon Danis. Why would he do that? There are so many bigger names that he could take on. Why would he choose Dillon Danis? And I saw a headline of why he did. I'm defending martial arts. I'm putting this clown down. To me, Logan Paul is a man, and so is Jake Paul. They're people that have been hated originally by a lot of martial artists and martial art fans, and also boxing fans and boxers themselves. And all of the moves that especially Jake Paul has made in his career have been to try and win over that fan base. The fighter pay stuff, he went after Dana White, even though Dana doesn't even decide how much fighters get paid. That's not even his job. He's a matchmaker. So he started going after Dana White for that, and all of the media that don't like the UFC, like Ariel Helwani, were like, yes, Jake Paul, say more about Dana White. Even though they know that Dana White doesn't even control the payouts of fighters. It's not even his job. But Jake Paul started going after him, winning over fighters that way. Then he started doing this whole, what's her name? Amanda Serrano situation with Katie Taylor, and he built that fight up, and that was a main event at MSG, and that was a big moment, and he got a lot of respect for that as well, and he's been paying out some of the fighters on his card, including Amanda Serrano, some good amounts of money and stuff like that. So he's winning over boxing here and there, and I think Logan Paul has seen the Jake Paul pathway of trying to win over a sport, and he's trying to do the same thing, because maybe down the line, I know Logan Paul said he wants to try out an MMA debut, maybe at Bellator. I know Scott Coker mentioned a while ago that they've been talking back and forth about it. I think Logan Paul's trying to win over the MMA fan base. in all honesty. And Neil Magny is saying, nah, you're doing this for yourself. Has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of us. Okay. Like, this is the reaction he's getting from some people. Like, Neil Magny is just pathetic, so here we are. Like, surely you would want to root for Logan Paul if you don't like what Dillon Danis is doing here. So I think in general, he will win over some fans from MMA, Neil Magny or not, fucking getting angry about this in his career. He's getting angry about this, Neil Magny, but surely some MMA fans that aren't too hardcore about MMA are just going to see Logan Paul take out the guy that everyone hates in Dillon Danis and start to sort of gravitate towards him a little bit more. And that's another market that he can conquer, and that's how Logan Paul thinks. So I think he's doing it to try and win over the MMA fan base. If he's the guy to shut out Dillon Danis out of the conversation of martial arts, that would be a good thing for a lot of fans that don't like Dillon Danis and don't like his antics, and a lot of fighters that don't like him either. And that would be a good winning over of a crowd for Logan Paul, and I reckon he would win. He's more powerful, he's bigger, he's stronger. Dillon Danis has had a bunch of knee surgeries. I have no idea what he was even planning to do to come back in his own career of MMA or anything. I think he's just been waiting for one of these moments where he can jump in to the spotlight and make a whole bunch of money fighting a guy like Logan Paul or Jake Paul or Tyron Woodley. And he's got Logan Paul, so it's going to be a big matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Jake Paul tries to organize something around that time as well. They could do a joint card, or maybe they want to do things separately. But this is a big matchup, and Dillon Danis will likely lose. However, if he wins, and he's on top, and now he's calling the shots and getting some big paychecks. So you got to kind of respect him taking it, but not really, because anyone would take this. You're just getting a massive paycheck for fighting Logan Paul. So either way, I reckon Logan Paul would win, but Danis has a good chance because, again, he has been training to punch for a long time. But that's how I feel about the matchup. Logan Paul wins by KO, wins over some fans. We move on to another matchup. Jake Paul versus Andrew Tate is also being rumoured and being speculated. And even the most loyal and the most trustworthy of sources, Keemstar, has talked about this, okay? And if Keemstar says it, it must be true. That's just how it works. You can have this guy say it, Washington Post come in and say it, the Daily Mail can come in and say something, but when Keemstar speaks, it's a fact. And we know that. If you know anything, you know that. But either way, Jake Paul versus Andrew Tate is cool. It's very cool. And I would really hope that this happens. Apparently, Jake Paul's going to call out Andrew Tate on the Logan Paul podcast and stuff like that. Apparently, it's a done deal, as per sources from a few people that have mentioned that they actually feel like this is going to go down and this is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen on the date that Jake Paul wants it to happen, which is coming up very soon in this month, I believe the 20th of August. But Andrew Tate versus Jake Paul would be an amazing fight. And Andrew Tate is like the big deal right now in the world of everything. So if Jake Paul beats him, it'd be a big deal for Jake Paul. It'd be a massive matchup as well. And if Andrew Tate beats him, he would just be the biggest name on earth, maybe. Not on earth, obviously. I'm not going to go that far, but he would be a huge, huge name. Like, he's already a big name, and he sort of runs the algorithm on the internet. I know a lot of people don't like to believe that, but there's a reason why people have him on his shows, and that's because he gets the most views on all of their shows. If he goes on this podcast, it's the most viewed podcast on their channel. If he goes on that past podcast, it's the most viewed podcast. I feel like Andrew Tate could conquer the internet. He hasn't quite done it yet. He's just had a bit of a boom. He's not going to be a mainstay. Like, if something happens to Andrew Tate and nothing further happens for him to jump his name up even more, I can see him starting to fade out slowly and becoming less and less relevant. But if Andrew Tate beats Jake Paul, JRE, and then do this, and then on the Impulsive podcast afterwards, and then start more, and do this again, and then his name's going to be in the circulation for the next decade if he can pull this off. So, I don't know if this is happening. It might be a whole bunch of nonsense, but if Andrew Tate is really about that life, as he says he is, this is the sort of stuff this is the thing he would do. I know he had a kickboxing match or an MMA fight a while ago where he was just attending the event to watch, and then one of the fights fell out and he just jumped in on like a day's notice and beat the guy or something like that. So he's not, He's not a guy who's never going to even step in on short notice or anything like that. And his whole thing and motto is he's ready to fight anyone at any time. And he'd whoop Jake Paul and wipe the floor with him. And he would do it for nothing as well, just to prove a point. So if Andrew Tate, if the top G is really about it and backs his own words, he should take on a guy like Jake Paul. I feel like he would win, but I'm worried. I'm worried. Imagine Jake Paul just sparks out Andrew Tate, and then Andrew Tate's just a fucking mockery of the internet for the next year or so. I think Andrew Tate knows that, sure, I could win, but this kid's actually kind of getting quite good, and he's a big guy with power, and if I lose everything, because you can't be Mr. Top G after getting highlight reeled by Jake Paul. You can't go back to that. You can play a game of, and maybe this is what Jake Paul's going to do. Maybe it's going to be both of them playing a game of, no, he didn't accept it. I tried to fight him, but he never accepted. You know what I mean? And all this type of stuff. And then Jake Paul's going to come back and say, we offered him the fight, and he never sort of accepted the matchup and all this type of stuff like that. But I feel as though if he does step up and fight, he would win. Because I think a lot of people are underestimating the size of Jake Paul's opponents, or they're overestimating, or whatever the word is that I'm supposed to be using here. Jake Paul's fought a bunch of guys smaller than him, and they aren't as good with their hands as Andrew Tate is, and Andrew Tate is bigger than Jake Paul. Jake Paul's kind of a weird height, because I think he's about 6 foot. But people say 6'1", 6'2", and people say Logan Paul 6'4", but then I'm looking at pictures and I'm thinking, Logan's like 6'2". You know what I mean? He's not 6'4", and stuff like that. So heights are always over-exaggerated. But Andrew Tate is probably a legit 6'3", big, powerful guy. He's not a skinny man. So I feel like he would give Jake Paul a lot of problems and probably finish him with body shots in round 2 or 3, depending on how good his conditioning is. But if he's the top G, these are the sort of stuff you step up to take on. So I think he should rise to the moment, make this happen. It would give me a good video to make, as it has done today, even the rumor of it. So that would be amazing news. I hope he does step up. I hope he does take on Jake Paul. I don't even need to see the fight. I just want the press conference. I want to see Andrew Tate at a press conference. And he may never fight again after this, but he's come out of retirement before. And he is a legit kickboxer, world champion. Like, he's got legit technique. And I don't know, his hands for boxing, though. His style in kickboxing was very hands low and leaving himself open, but taking shots well. He's got a good chin, even though he doesn't look like a guy who would have a good chin. He's actually got a decently good chin, and he's got good movement as well, and good reads on what his opponent's going to throw to get himself out of the way and stuff like that. A very unorthodox style, but maybe that could work against Jake Paul. So I'd be worried, but I'd think Andrew Tate would win. We'll see if this happens, though. This would be a big matchup. This would be a huge matchup as well, so we'll see what they do. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I'd pick Logan Paul to win and Andrew Tate to win. And maybe after this, we'll see a Logan Paul, Andrew Tate. I don't know. I thought I'd make the video because this is massive news right now. So I'm sorry, MMA fans. Let's get back to MMA very shortly. Okay, later today in a couple of hours. Toodle pip. See you later. Goodbye.